So the background information, did you know that the suicide forest is also referred to, like I said, the suicide forest, and it's referred to as the sea of trees? And the reason why I'm so interested in the reason why I'm so interested in this topic is because I feel that suicide prevention, you should be educated about suicide prevention, and that you should be knowledgeable of what exactly to do when someone is considering to commit suicide. As for, another piece. According to the online web Mental Floss, which has been featured in the LA Times, published an article called The 15 Eerie Things About the Suicide Forest. And they stated that the suicide forest is actually ranked one of the most dangerous places, actually the most popular places to commit suicide. It actually juggles back and forth with the Golden Gate Bridge. So to state my thesis, I'm going to talk a little bit about, first they made a movie about the suicide forest, and that's really when people were introduced a little bit about it, but not a lot of people are familiar with the background information or how the actual forest got its name as the suicide forest, or necessarily what their government is actually doing to prevent suicide. Okay, transition. All right, so next I'm going to discuss, I'm going to tell you a little about the scenery and to give you a visual of the scenery. And so the Yamanashi Tourism Organization published an article in 2011 called The Nature Found in the Aikaigahara Forest. And it stated that the Sea of Trees started to grow on top of lava when Mount Fuji erupted in 1864. And it spanned over 3,000 acres, I believe, of acres, and it's ongoing for about 1,200 years. And usually that's actually a small period of time in history. It's a very brief moment in time. And just to give a few examples, there's different types of trees, which actually gives its name, the Sea of Trees. There's hemlock fir, there's the Japanese cypress, there's other evergreen needle leaves, and just to list a few, there's more on the side. And there's also different plants. There's shrubs, there's moss that grow all throughout the forest. And when I think of a forest, I think of huge trees, green everywhere, and moss all over the place. And that's exactly what it looks like. To discuss a little bit more, there's wildlife that resides at the forest. There are bats that live in the lava caves. There's mice, there's moles, there's different beetles and insects, and there's birds too. One of the examples is the Japanese bush warbler. And next I'm going to talk a little bit about, next I'll discuss how the forest actually got its name, the suicide forest. So on the official website for the Aikaigahara Forest, the most common folklore told is that the forest is home to an angry soul called Yurei. I hope I pronounced it right. And often people feel as though when they enter the forest that this Yurei, these angry souls, are actually having them, trick them a little bit into going off the path. So that's one of the scary parts. And usually every year, there's forest guards who, they do a search to find the different bodies that are found within the forest. And often, many times, they take the bodies and they put them in this room that's right alongside the forest. And what they do is the guards actually have to do rock, paper, scissors, play a game to decide who gets to sleep overnight with the bodies. And then in addition to that, people are so scared about these myths and these legends that they believe that they don't want the Yurei souls to actually go in the body and possess it. So what they do is they often sleep right next to the body overnight. Finally, I'm going to discuss a little bit about how the Japanese government prevents suicide throughout the forest, and along with how you can prevent suicide in general. For the forest, you'll see there's a surveillance camera at the bottom of my slide. And one of the first things that they want to do is to put surveillance cameras at the main entrance so they can see who enters the forest and who never leaves. And then in addition to that, they have, there's an example of one of the signs that they post. They post different messages throughout the forest. And for an example, what one of them says is, your life is a precious gift from your parents. And a lot of times, they have like a hotline underneath, and it's a suicide hotline. But often you can't get reception or calls. So what do you do in that situation? You rely heavily on the messages and to influence you whether you want to commit suicide or you want to spare your life. according to sorry, I lost my point a little bit. Oh, and also, I'm going to discuss how to prevent suicide in general. So, in April 2015, the article from the National Institute of Health, which is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, stated that suicide is the 10th leading death in the U.S. And often, many people seek help before, and they believe that in order to seek help before, that you can see different medical professionals, you can actually seek help. And often people who do seek help before, it's usually 64% of Americans seek help a month before their attempt to commit suicide, and along with 38% seek help a week before their actual attempt to commit suicide. And so some of the ways you can actually prevent suicide is by seeing a therapist. You can take actual medication, or you can actually visit a doctor. And some of the resources you can use within your community, they're accessible all the time. You can use hotlines. You can use, you can also see a doctor, like I said before. So just to restate my thesis a little bit, I'm going to I mentioned how the U.S. was really introduced to the suicide force when the movie The Forest came out. But not a lot of people were familiar with the background information or how the forest actually got its name. And along with that, people aren't educated about what Japan is actually doing to prevent suicide. So to close off my presentation, if you, someone you know, or a friend, a family member is ever contemplating committing suicide, you can call 1-800-SUICIDE, and remember that death is not the only choice. You have more than one option, and hopefully you never have to go through something like that.